1997 is pivotal. The first Harry Potter book is published. The movie Titanic was released and became a box office hit in Mexico. Cruz Azul won their 8th title against Leon with a goal by Carlos Hermosillo. Meanwhile, in WWE, we could say they had their most successful year in a long time. And all of that was because their creative ideas were improving considerably. Several wrestlers were starting to position themselves, however, not everything was going so well since World Championship Wrestling was still beating them in ratings and Vince McMahon didn't know what to do to bounce back. Greetings to Alberto Gonzalez. Remember to leave your comment and you could be greeted in the next videos. Thank you. When we said goodbye to 1996, Psycho Sid was the top WWE champion. The real hatred between Michaels and Bret Hart kept growing, and Stone Cold's popularity was starting to rise, week by week. Vince McMahon kept reinventing himself to attract new fans to his video company. That's how, on January 4th, he would launch a new show called Shotgun Saturday Night. Although this show never reached the ratings of Raw, he worked hard to have a decent product. Then, on January 19th, the Royal Rumble would take place, where Hunter Hearst would retain his Intercontinental title against Goldust. On the other hand, Ahmed Johnson would get revenge on his new rival, Farouk. The city of Texas would see its wrestler, Shawn Michaels, win the WWE title after defeating Psycho Sid in less than 14 minutes, thus beginning his second reign as champion. Now, if we go to the Royal Rumble, Stone Cold would enter as number 5 and make it to the end, where he would be eliminated by Bret Hart. Taking advantage of the referee's distraction, he got back in the ring and ended up eliminating Hitman to claim the victory. Even though WWE intended for people to hate Austin after this, the fans loved him more and more every day. Obviously, the victory wasn't clean. That's how the WWE president, Gorilla Monsoon, said he didn't agree with the way Austin won. He arranged a fatal 4-way match between Stone Cold and the 3 wrestlers he had illegally eliminated at the next event, and the winner would face Michaels at WrestleMania for the 2018 championship before getting to WrestleMania. Shawn Michaels would vacate the title after suffering a knee injury. Something that many people backstage, including Bret Hart, didn't believe, since they said he was only doing this to avoid losing the title to Bret Hart. However, the fatal 4-way match meant to decide Shawn's challenger quickly became a bout for the vacant title. And after 24 minutes, it would be Bret Hart who would become a 4-time WWE champion. On the other hand, Rocky Maivia would successfully defend his Intercontinental title, which he had won 3 days earlier, to Hunter. On Raw, Owen Hart and the British Bulldog managed to retain their tag team titles the following night on Raw Psycho. Sid sought his rematch for the title against Bret Hart, and thanks to interference from Stone Cold Psycho, Sid managed to win his second WWE title. And obviously, all this rivalry between Bret and Austin would carry on until WrestleMania 13. But before getting to WrestleMania, on February 26, the British Bulldog would defeat his teammate Owen Hart in the final of a tournament to crown the European champion. On the other hand, it was said that Bret Hart didn't like at all the support and popularity that Stone Cold was getting, and he would show his anger and frustration in several ways, even calling WWE crap. Live on television, Hart knew he was under pressure to prove that he was truly a complete and experienced wrestler. And that's how we get to WrestleMania 13 on March 23rd, where we could probably say that one of the best matches of all time took place. Where the only rule was that the only way to win was by submission. The match would last a little over 20 minutes. And Austin, who couldn't take the sharpshooter anymore, and due to the heavy blood loss on his face, he ended up passing out, forcing the special referee Ken Shamrock to call the match. The Chicago crowd gave Austin a standing ovation, something Hart didn't like, and that's why he attacked him after the match. From that moment on, their roles were reversed, with Austin becoming the face and Bret Hart becoming the villain. In the main event of WrestleMania, we had Psycho Sid facing The Undertaker for the title, where the champion ended up falling to the dead man. This would make The Undertaker WWE champion for the second time. This would make Paul Bret try to hide to regain the champion's trust in the coming weeks. He was desperate to be the manager of the most important man in the company, and he blackmailed him in the worst way. He told him that if he didn't cooperate, he would reveal his most embarrassing secret to the world. Undertaker would fight back by facing and defeating Mankind, the challenger personally chosen by Paul Bret. On April 20, Injured House 14 would arrive, which would not only bring the great story of Taker, but also Hart's story. Now as a villain, where they would form the Hart Foundation, now made up of Owen Hart himself. The British Bulldog Jim Nath Hart and Brian Pillman, even though they were villains, were really cheered when they were in Canada. Even Stone Cold was booed and faced Bret Hart in his own country. If we go back to Injured House, Stone Cold would defeat Hart by disqualification, and that way he would become the #1 contender for The Undertaker's world title. That opportunity would come on May 11 at the next event, Injured House 15. Remember that before this event, Owen Hart would defeat The Rock and become the new Intercontinental Champion, keeping the Hart Foundation under his control. With the Intercontinental, European, and Tag Team titles, when the match for the main title arrived, Brian Pillman would come out to distract Stone Cold, and that way, The Undertaker would take the victory. Another highlight of that event was that Ken Shamrock had his first official match after making the jump from UFC to WWE. A really violent match which saw Vader break his nose. Everyone said that Ken Shamrock was eager to reach the top in WWE. However, in the following weeks, another big man would return. Shawn Michaels would form a somewhat uneasy alliance with Stone Cold, which would even lead them to become tag team champions. Both of them. They were only united by their hatred of the Hitman, but Stone Cold's feud with Bret Hart was just on screen. However, Bret and Michaels truly hated each other and exchanged harsh jabs whenever possible. If we move a little further into the event, King of the Ring hunter Herr Helmsman, who had hired Chyna as his bodyguard, would go on to become the King of the Ring Undertaker. He agreed to let Paul Bearer manage him, and that night successfully defended his title against Farouk. After that, Undertaker would remove him from his side, and this would force Paul Bearer to reveal the secret. Kane, his long-lost brother, was still alive and hadn't died in the fire that took their parents' lives. Also, Paul Bearer clarified that it was Undertaker himself who started that fire, something Taker denied. Michaels would get injured and could no longer compete alongside Austin. Mankind tried to replace him, but Austin refused, saying he wanted nothing to do with a freak. He was reassigned to face Hart and the Bulldog alone. The following week, halfway through the match, however, Foley debuted a new character known as Duty Love, who helped Austin get the win, making them the new tag team champions. SummerSlam would arrive, and Bret Hart would face The Undertaker. But Michaels would be the special referee, with the condition that if he tried to cheat Bret Hart, he would never be able to wrestle again in the United States. Tensions between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels led Michaels to accidentally attack Undertaker, and in that way, Hart would become the top WWE champion once again. This really hurt Michaels, as the last thing he wanted was Bret Hart winning the title again. In other matches, the British Bulldog would defeat Ken Shamrock, and Mick Foley would once again become Mankind to defeat Hunter in a steel cage. Although what we all remember from that night is that Owen Hart broke the Rattlesnake's neck with a badly executed piledriver. And this would put Austin out of action. However, he was able to continue the match and came out victorious anyway. Later, at the hospital, they would see how serious the situation was, and he would realize that he would be out of the ring for some time. Austin would get in trouble with management as they forced him to vacate his Intercontinental and Tag Team titles. On the other hand, Michaels was looking for more support. That's how he joined up with his old friend from the clique, Hunter, as well as Chyna and Rick Rude. And that way, they would create D-Generation X, a group of outlaws who broke the rules at every moment, both inside and outside the ring. They would always look out for each other everywhere, creating absolute power because the WWE product was working better. This made Vince McMahon slightly increase the price of event tickets, and that way it allowed him to have more money and stay on the air. On United States of America Network, months earlier, Vince McMahon had told Bret Hart that he couldn't give him a raise, and this made Bret start negotiating with World Championship Wrestling. Now that Vince was making more money, he wanted to talk to Bret and reach a new agreement, but it was already too late when he realized that Bret Hart had already closed the deal with the other company. The only big problem with all of this was that Bret Hart was the top WWE champion on September 22 on Raw Stone Cold. He shocked everyone by attacking Vince McMahon, hinting at their upcoming intense rivalry. Foley's other persona, Cactus Jack, also made his debut in the company that same week. Another big controversy would come, a real one, during the United Kingdom event called One Night Only. Shawn Michaels would use all his backstage influence to ask for the British Bulldog's European title. Who would lose it, in his own country? And in front of his sister, who was fighting cancer, Shawn Michaels was starting to become the most hated wrestler backstage. But when Bad Blood arrived on October 5th, he faced The Undertaker in the first ever Hell in a Cell, something that prevented his friends from the X from helping him. To everyone's surprise, Kane would make his debut at the end of the match, break the door of the cage, and attack The Undertaker. That event would not only be remembered for its tremendous matches, but also for tragic reasons. Before the show, that same night, Brian Pillman was found lifeless in his hotel room. Owen Hart would win the vacant Intercontinental title, and The Rock, with his team called Nation of Domination, would defeat Legend of Doom. In a sea of booze, Rocky Media had turned heel and would continue gaining experience to do whatever he wanted. Survivor Series would arrive, where Kane would defeat Mankind, and Stone Cold would return to reclaim his Intercontinental title. After winning the Hell in a Cell, Michaels established himself as the #1 contender for the title, which would lead to Michaels and Bret Hart facing each other. The Montreal Screwjob happened that night, and while it's a long story, I'll summarize it. This is likely Bret Hart's final W match, and Vince didn't want him to take the title to the other company. Hart refused to hand over the title to Michaels in his country Canada, according to the creative control clause in his contract. The night before, some people gathered in Vince's office to deceive Bret Hart and make it look like he submitted, when in reality he didn't. Michaels would win the title that night, and after that, Bret Hart would break everything in his path. This problem was real and had nothing to do with the show. Bret Hart even spat at Vince McMahon in public and flashed the World Championship Wrestling sign to fans. All the Hart family left WWE except Owen. The next day, Vince had an interview with Jim Ross, where you could see his black eye after the hard punch Bret Hart gave him backstage. Vince would take on this villain role and create Mr. McMahon. On December 7 In Your House took place, where Taka Michinoku defeated Bryan Christopher to become the new light heavyweight champion. The New Age Outlaws defended the tag team titles they won on Raw and Jeff. Jarrett defeated The Undertaker after Kane attacked him again to convince him to face him. In the main event, Stone Cold defeated The Rock in a match that set the stage for their later incredible rivalry. Michaels defended his title against Ken Shamrock and was later attacked by Owen Hart at the end of the show. Although Owen would get a title shot against Michaels to avenge his brother, Michaels would once again use his power to make this happen on a Raw show and not at an event like it deserved. Michaels didn't want to give up his European title and only wanted to hand it over to his friend Hunter, in a truly mocking and comedic match where he threw himself to the ground and Triple H pinned him. However, Stone Cold would also vacate his Intercontinental title and give it to The Rock so he could focus on chasing the WWE Championship. The following year would be much better. WWE would start to rebound in its numbers. And just like in the days of Hulk Hogan, would they see the light at the end of the tunnel again?